There's a tradition. It's good to go.
Yeah, you should be good. I'm just gonna
Okay, so I'll just do a bit.
just ignore this. Yeah, which one is fine.
This one? How?
No.
Oh, no. It's good? Okay. I think it's better.
What's that thing?
Oh, no, they're projecting. Don't worry.
Okay. Uh-huh. So...
Okay, hello everyone. Hello. Hi. So just like what has happened over the past so many years, whenever I'm here, there's a technical issue. Sorry about that. But anyway, this is not about me. So I'm very, very happy to have Dr. Yang Wu from UC Scarborough, or UT Scarborough, sorry, join us today and give a talk, show her work about early development and how important emotion is. Well, just a little bio, and Dr. Wu, graduate from MIT, and then continue with postdoc at Stanford. It's just very, very stressful things when you hear about those things. And the first time I actually talked to Dr. Wu, that was many years ago, 2017, I guess. She definitely not remember. And I asked, oh, what are the study you published? And then she said, oh, I only have one publication in PNAS. I thought that's not going to be good for me. But you will see how amazing work she will be created over the years and how much impact she has created. But anyway, so I hope you could enjoy her talk as much as I enjoyed over the years. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so I first want to make sure everyone can hear me well. Is it okay? Okay, cool. So first, thanks for having me, and also thanks for the introduction. Today, I'm going to talk about emotion as information in early social learning. Okay, so to start my talk, I'd like to first show you a picture. So here, you see two people. Both of them are making an emotional expression. What can you infer from these expressions? Great. So you may infer they're surprised and also maybe a little bit of excited, right? And indeed, one common view about emotional expressions is that they're about feelings. That is, when we see other people's emotional expressions, we use them to understand how other people feel. But now, let's zoom out a little bit and see what was actually happening. So what was actually happening was that they were demonstrating a toy to a little baby. They said 1, 2, 3, go, and then press a button on top of the toy, and the toy starts to play music. So these emotional expressions might reflect their true feelings, but it might also be deliberately displayed even though they totally know how the toy works. So emotional expressions, are they actually just about feelings? So in my talk, I'm going to propose a different view. I propose that emotional expressions are a rich source of information about the world, and even very young children can use them to reason, understand, and learn about the world. So in my research, rather than studying emotion as feelings, I study how children use them to make inferences, such as what do they see, what do they want, what do they believe, and how does the toy work. And I study this by combining behavioral developmental experiments with computational modeling. So I study both infants and older children to reveal the developmental pattern. And I also use computational modeling to formalize these abilities. in order to build formal theories of human learning and cognition. And this emotion as information view, it's supported by a lot of the developmental and cognitive research evidence. So there's actually a lot of evidence suggesting that young learners are sensitive to information provided by other people. For example, given very simple speech, such as this is a text, and also a very simple action, such as pressing a button to play music, even young learners, they follow others' gaze, imitate actions, learn novel words, draw causal inferences, and can also make a very sophisticated social evaluation, such as who's knowledgeable, who's nice, and who's reliable. And the old computational framework is that these abilities are supported by an intuitive theory of other people. So that is, learners understand that these social signals are generated by both the external events in the world and also other people's internal mental states. And given this intuitive theory, they can use observed speech and action signals to reason backward, to reason about the physical world and also the social world. But both the empirical work and the computational models I have talked about, they have largely ignored one very important source of information. As you can see here, the adult has no emotional expression at all in this framework. So in my work, I put emotional expressions back to the picture. And I propose that children can not only understand how events and internal mental states generate speech and actions, but also emotional expressions. And based on this intuitive theory, they can use emotion as information to reason about hidden events and also other people's hidden mental states. And grounded in this framework, my talk today has 3 parts. So I will spend, I think, maybe around half of my time talking about what inferences learners can make from emotional expressions. And next, I will talk about some of my ongoing work looking at the underlying cognitive underpinnings that allow learners to use emotion as information. And last, I will move to the other person in the picture, the adult, and look at the role of environmental inputs in facilitating the use of emotion as information. Okay, so first, what inferences learners can make? So we started with a project looking at whether even infants can connect others' emotional vocalizations to their likely causes in the world. And in that project, we first selected a range of emotion-eliciting stimuli that even very young children can easily recognize. These include pictures that are funny, exciting, adorable, sympathetic, and delicious. And then we recorded adults' emotional, vocal emotional responses to them. And here are some examples.
Ooh. Aww. Oh. Mmm.
Okay? And during the study, here's what we did. In each trial, we presented 2 pictures side by side on a screen, and then played one vocalization, like this. And our prediction here is that if babies understand that vocalization, they would shift their gaze to the silly face, which is a likely cause of the laughing sound. And by contrast, if they hear a vocalization like this,
Ooh. Ooh.
we predict that they would shift their look into the other picture, which is the shiny, cool toy. This is a more likely cause of the excited sound. And using this paradigm, we tested infants between 12 to 17 months old. And here I'm going to plot their looking time accuracy over a 7-second interval. This is the interval where a vocalization was played. And we found that, as predicted, babies, they did shift their look into the matched picture, and the peak was around the 5th second. So what does this mean? I wanted to highlight 2 things here. So first, we did not simply asking babies to recognize emotional expressions. It's not a recognition task. We are really trying to understand whether they can do the causal mapping between the vocal emotional expressions and their likely causes in the environment. So this is the causal mapping task. And second, we also didn't simply contrast a positive emotional expression with a negative one. Here, we are looking at much more fine-grained understanding. Like here, we have a range of positive vocal emotional expressions that are elicited by things like that are funny, exciting, adorable, and delicious. So this suggests that infants can not only connect emotional expressions to their likely causes in the environment, but also do the mapping in a relatively fine-grained way. And this ability emerges around the second year of life. Okay. But you might wonder, here, this is just a mapping task, right? Babies can see both the external causes in their environment and also can hear the vocal emotional expression, and they just need to map the two. And the next question we asked was whether infants can also use others' emotional expressions to infer hidden causes and use that to guide their active exploration. So we answered this question in our follow-up experiments. So here's what we did. We made a box like this. So as you can see, there's a top hole at the top of the box through which you can peek inside. And there's also a front opening and through which you can search inside the box and retrieve items from it. And during the study, in front of a baby, an experimenter looked into the box through the top hole and then made an emotional vocalization, such as, "Aww." And then the experimenter gave the box to the baby to play with. So imagine that now you're the baby, you searched the box, and you found an adorable toy puppy from inside the box. What would you think, and what would you do next? And by contrast, if you heard the experimenter say, "Aww," and then you searched the box and you found a yummy snack, what would you do, and what would you think, and what would you do next? So our prediction here is that if the baby retrieved the toy puppy, which is congruent with the vocalization, they might think that, okay, that's it. There's nothing else in the box, and they would stop their search. But if they found a yummy snack, which is incongruent with the vocalization, they might think that maybe there's something else in the box. They may go back to the box and continue to search. So this is our prediction. They would search longer in the incongruent condition than the congruent condition if they understand this causal relationship. And we also had another emotion condition where the experimenter said, So here, the yummy snack is a congruent cause, but the adorable puppy is an incongruent one. But similarly, we expect them to search longer in the incongruent condition compared to the congruent condition. Okay, so overall, it's a 2x2 design. We manipulated what the experimenter vocalized and which item the baby found inside the box. And we used this paradigm to test two emotion contrasts. We had two experiments. The first one is what I just described. It's the contrast between "aw" versus And we also had another experiment looking at the contrast between "aw" versus "wow." And in both experiments, we found that babies search longer in the incongruent condition than the congruent condition. Okay, so these results suggest that infants can not only map emotional expressions to their likely causes in the environment, but they can also use emotional expressions to infer hidden causes and to use that to guide their active exploration. Okay, so in our next experiment, we tried to find even stronger evidence. So the idea here is that babies, when they see the box, they had no prior expectation about what's inside. And they totally relied on the experimenter's emotional vocalization to make an inference. But in the real world, in many cases, they do have some prior expectation about the world. And we wonder, when they see others' emotional expressions such as surprise, can they use that cue to revise their prior expectation? And we think this revision might suggest even stronger evidence of using emotion as information. So we answered this question using a study like this. So here, there's an experimenter. She covered her eyes and then randomly sampled a ball from a box like this. And here's a video.
I'm going to take a ball. Look at me. I got one, and I put it in here. Okay.
Okay, what do you think she got? A red ball or a white ball? Great, great. So actually, even little babies have this expectation. They predict that when the experimenter reviews the outcome, it would be the statistically probable outcome, the red ball. But if they found that actually it's a white ball, they are surprised and they look longer at it. So this is known as the violation of expectation paradigm, and this is the typical looking time pattern. Okay? And in our study, everything was exactly the same, except for one critical change. We added an event after the experimenter sampled the ball, but before she reviewed it to infants. And here's a
I got one, and I put it in here. Okay, I'm going to take a look first. Look what I got.
Okay, so here, before she reviews the outcome to babies, they took a look first and showed unsurprised, satisfied expression. And because there's nothing unusual here, we predicted that babies would expect that she got the probable outcome and would show the typical looking time pattern. Okay, and our critical condition is the next one.
I got one, and I put it in here. Okay, I'm going to take a look first. Look what I got!
Okay, here the prediction is that if babies understand that surprise expression, they would use that surprise to revise their prior expectations, so that in this condition, they would expect the improbable outcome rather than probable outcome. And their looking time pattern would disappear, the typical pattern would disappear, or even be reversed following the surprise expression. And again, we used a 2x2 design. We manipulated whether the experimenter's expression was an unsurprised expression or a surprise. And we also manipulated whether the outcome at the end was the improbable or probable outcome. And we are looking for an interaction effect between the two types of emotions and the two types of outcomes. Okay, so again, we tested infants between 12 to 17 months old. And we started with experiment 1, where the order of trials was counterbalanced. And also because we found a hint of order effect in this experiment, we followed up with 2 other experiments where we manipulated the trial order. So in experiment 2A, we always started with 2 surprised trials, followed by 2 unsurprised trials. And in experiment 2B, the order was reversed. And also we increased the sample size significantly in the last 2 experiments. And overall, in experiment 1, we found the predicted interaction effect here. Like in the unsurprised condition, as predicted, we found that infants looked longer in the improbable condition than the probable condition. But in the surprise condition, we only found a non-significant trend of a reversal, although the interaction effect was significant. And that's why we look at the order effects and see whether we can get better understanding of this. And we found that in experiment 2A, when surprise trials were presented first, there was no effect at all. But when the unsurprised trials were presented first, we found the predicted interaction effect and also a complete reversal of the effect in the surprise condition. So as you may know, this kind of order effect is not uncommon in infant research. So because babies, they usually need time to process the stimuli, and we usually need to familiarize them a little bit before we show them the key event. So what the order effect suggests here is that probably because the unsurprised trials are simpler, this acted as additional familiarization for them in order to do the harder thing, which is to revise their expectations in the surprised trials. Okay, so just to recap, here I've shown you that even infants can use others' emotional expressions to reason about the physical world. This ability is fine-grained. It can guide infants' active exploration, and it is also powerful enough to revise their prior expectations. And I also have another line of work looking at how children learn about the social world from others' emotional expressions. So for this line of work, basically we found that as children get older, they can make increasingly sophisticated mental state inferences from emotional expressions. And this allows them to better understand the social world, such as what other people want, what other people believe, and even some abstract qualities such as other people's competence. I also have some computational modeling work trying to formalize this with computational models. I don't have time to talk about all this today, but I'm just going to focus on one study to give you an example. So in that study, we looked at how children use teachers' emotional expression to learn about students' competence. So here we look at older kids because this involves some mental state reasoning, which is relatively more abstract and sophisticated. And here's what we did. So we told children a story like this. This is a teacher, and the teacher is watching her students, Alex and Kyle, solving a math problem. And both students got the exact same math problem right. And the teacher was surprised at Alex's success, but not surprised at Kyle's success. Who do you think is better at math? Any guesses? Kyle, great. So the intuition here is that although both students solved the exact same math problem, you might still think that maybe Kyle is better because the teacher was only surprised at Alex's success, which means that she didn't expect Alex to succeed at the math problem. And similarly, if two other students both failed, and the teacher showed the same emotional expressions, one surprise and the other no surprise, then you might have the expectation that maybe Sam here is better because the teacher showed a surprise only to him, suggesting that the teacher did not believe Sam would fail at this task. So in both cases, although two students performed exactly the same, children, our guess was that children might use the teacher's emotional expressions to infer what the teacher believed, and then to infer the student's competence. And these are the intuitions we tested in this study. Okay, so here we started with testing a group of adults to validate our intuitions. So this is adult data. We have the success condition where both students succeeded and the fail condition where both students failed. And we found that as predicted, adults inferred that when both students succeeded, the student to whom the teacher expressed no surprise, they judged that student as better. And also as predicted, when both students failed, adults judged that to whom the teacher expressed surprise as better. Okay? And this results encourage us to look at children over a wide age range. And we found a similar pattern. It's smaller effect size, but it's the same direction of effects. And we also found an age effect here. we found that children at age 6 and older, but not younger, showed the predicted pattern of results. So then next, we replicated the older kids' results using a larger sample, and we showed the effect again. So these results suggest that even when two students perform the same, children by age 6 use teachers' emotional expressions to infer who is more competent. So this finding is particularly interesting to me, and I usually talk about this study along with my other infant work, because I think it shows a lot of additional interesting things. So first, it suggests again that children, they have powerful ability to use other people's emotional expressions to make inferences. But it also shows that depending on the nature of the information conveyed by those expressions, emotional expressions can either be very helpful for learning, but may also backfire sometimes if depending on the, as I said, depending on the nature of the information. So this dual effect, I think it really highlights the importance of increasing our awareness of our emotional expressions in front of kids. And by doing that, we can more strategically and effectively guide children's learning. Okay, so just another recap. So far, I've shown you that beyond using other people's emotional expressions as feelings, here, even very young learners can use others' emotional expressions to learn about the physical world and the social world. And this is where I usually end my talk in the past. And for today, I also very excited to share with you some of my ongoing work. So I labeled this part as part 1. And in the next part, I will talk about my ongoing work looking at the underlying cognitive underpinnings that allow learners to use emotion as information. Okay, so, so as we talked about, the original model I had was this. So children understand that both events in the world and others' internal mental states give rise to their emotional expressions. And based on this intuitive theory, they can use others' emotional expression as information to reason about the physical world and the social world. But this model is not very satisfying because there are only two main factors that influence emotion, which are events and mental states. In the real world, there are actually a lot of factors that influence how someone would feel, including things like the probability of the event, who's responsible for the event, whether the event is morally acceptable, whether the event is consistent with the person's self-image, and also whether the person has the power to change the outcome. And my postdoc, Tiffany, she is currently proposing a theoretical framework that can capture a more comprehensive intuitive theory of emotion and its development. And her approach is to integrate insights from classic theories in the emotion domain with developmental theories. And more specifically, the classic theories she's building up on is appraisal theories. And as you may know, appraisal theories is one of the most influential and also long-lasting theories in the field of emotion. I say it's very long-lasting because the original concept of appraisal was proposed, I think, in 1960s, and then further developed as appraisal theories over the following decades. And the theory was originally proposed to capture how adults' first-person emotional experiences are generated. And to give you an example, here, Sally stole a cookie and ate it. This is an eliciting event. And then the theory proposed that how Sally would feel about this event depends on how she evaluate, or they call appraise, the event over a long list of appraisal dimensions, like whether this is congruent with her goal, whether this is morally acceptable, whether it's consistent with her self-image, whether she would blame herself or others, whether she can cope with the outcome, and so on, a lot of things. And it's based on her appraisal of the event, that determines how she would feel. Like she might feel happy or guilty, or ashamed, or angry, or relieved. And what Tiffany is proposing is that when a learner reasons about another person's emotion, they may go through a similar appraisal process. That is, when they see that Sally stole a cookie and ate it, they might evaluate or appraise the event from Sally's perspective. This is a process we call third-person appraisal, and it's based on the same appraisal dimensions, and this determines how the learner would infer how Sally would feel. And additionally, when they only get to observe Sally's emotional expression, they can use that as information to reason backward about the hidden appraisals. And the main benefit of integrating insights from appraisal theories is that appraisal theories have proposed and validated a very long list of appraisal dimensions that connect to emotion. So here is a long list. You don't need to read it in detail, but I show you just to make several points here. First, this list includes dimensions that we have talked about, such as goals, desires, and beliefs. And more importantly, there are also a lot of other cognitive appraisal dimensions that are suggested by appraisal theories but have not been received that much attention in the developmental literature. So the integration of the two literatures really provides us with a guiding framework to find some missing pieces and also to have a more comprehensive understanding of the cognitive underpinnings of our ability to use emotion as information for reasoning and inferences. And currently, we are working on a theory paper proposing this theoretical framework. And we have also started several empirical studies that are inspired by this framework. And for today, I'm going to focus on one study to give you an example. So I'm going to focus on power. So again, this dimension is one cognitive dimension that has received a lot of attention in emotion research, but not in developmental research. So we have not yet known at what age children start to integrate this cognitive dimension with emotion. Okay, so more specifically, based on appraisal theories, someone's power to change an event outcome includes things like money, physical strength, knowledge, and also the ability to recruit help. And here we asked whether children can consider other people's power to change an event outcome when inferring others' emotions. And we started this by telling children a story like this. So here, this is Anne. Her mom gave her enough money to buy one donut. So she has money to buy one donut, and we highlight that one donut there. And today, Anne wants to eat one donut, so she bought one. And at this point, we asked children how Sally feels at this point using a face scale. But next, what happened was that Anne accidentally dropped her donut, so she cannot eat it. And we asked children again how Anne feels. So this is one example condition. And across conditions, everything was exactly the same, except that we manipulated the number of donuts the protagonist has money to buy initially. So they could either buy 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 donuts. And to give you an example, here's the 5 donut condition. So here's another child named Tess. And Tess has enough money to buy 5 donuts. And we highlight the 5 donuts. And then the exact same thing happened. Today she wants to eat 1 donut. She bought one. And we asked her to rate how she feels. And then she accidentally dropped it. And we asked again how she feels. And here, you might have intuition that although Tess would definitely feel sad about dropping her donut, but she might feel less sad compared to the other condition because she has money left to buy more donuts. Okay, So we first validated our intuition with a group of adults. And here, the x-axis is the number of donuts that a child can buy initially. And the y-axis is participants' emotion ratings. And we found that when a protagonist only has money to buy one donut, adults judge that the protagonist is the happiest when buying a donut and felt the worst when losing it compared to other conditions. And as the protagonist has more and more money, their emotions are, the intensity of their emotions are less influenced by the exact same events. So again, I wanted to emphasize here is that the exact same events happen to all protagonists across conditions, and the only difference was the number of donuts they can buy initially. So the difference between conditions was mainly driven by that single factor. And then we look at when disability develops over development. And the only difference here is that we only have 3 conditions, 1, 3, and 5, because we just wanted to shorten the experiment because children, they have limited attention span. But overall, we found the exact same pattern. We found that when the protagonist only has money to buy 1 donut, children judge that person to feel the happiest, when buying a donut and felt the worst when losing it. And as the protagonist has more money, they judge that the person's emotions are less influenced by the same events. And taken together, we found that adults and children infer that people's emotional responses to the exact same events differ depending on how much power or resources those people have. They infer that the less power or resource someone has, the happier they feel when buying a desired item and the sadder when losing it. So this is just one example. We are currently looking into several cognitive dimensions that connect to emotion and also their developmental pattern. And we predict that as children get older, they are increasingly able to connect more and more cognitive dimensions with emotion. And this expanded knowledge allows them to become more and more precise in predicting others' emotions and also in using others' emotions as information to draw inferences about the physical and the social world. Okay, another recap. So in part 1, we have talked about what inferences learners can make from emotional expressions. And in part 2, we talked about a relatively more comprehensive list of cognitive underpinnings that potentially support learners' ability to use emotion as information. And in part 3, I'm going to move on to the other person, the adult. And the question here is that, is everything just about the learner? Or do adults also play an active role in this learning process? And our hypothesis is that it's probably more like a bidirectional process. It's not just that learners are good at using emotion as information for learning, but also adults are actively providing that information, especially when the learners are little, like when they are infants. They're also actively providing those information for pedagogical purposes. And this hypothesis is actually motivated by a lot of the well-established findings in developmental research. So I think probably you know Motherese or infant-directed speech. So this phenomenon suggests that it describes that when adults talk to little babies, they usually use simpler, slower, and more dynamic speech compared to when they're talking to adults. And this modified speech, usually they found that it facilitates babies' learning of language. And adults also do motionies. Here, they usually do this kind of expansive, repetitive movements when demonstrating something to little babies. And this modification has been shown to support or facilitate little babies' imitation, also understanding of goal-directed actions. And the question is there also emotion needs where adults express emotions to babies in ways that facilitate early acquisition of emotion knowledge? And this is the question we have started answering. And I also want to say here, we just started this line of work and everything is very preliminary. I'm talking about it mainly just to stimulate some thoughts and discussion here. Okay, so the question my student Han Qi and I started addressing was, I think it's a very fundamental one. At first, we just wanted to know whether adults express emotions differently to infants compared to other adults. And we recruited parents of infants aged 6 to 14 months old, and all participants participated remotely from home. And during the study, we showed them emotion-provoking pictures, including some positive ones here, like colorful bubbles, adorable stuffed animals, and also yummy snacks. We also showed them some negative ones, like broken toys, dangerous fire, and rotten fruits. And we asked participants to share their feelings about these pictures in 2 conditions. In the adult-directed condition, we asked them to share their feelings with an experimenter on Zoom. And in the infant-direct condition, we asked them to share their feelings with their own baby. And I have a video here.
Yeah. Oh, it's so sad. The toy is broken. Oh, it's so sad. Yeah, the toy won't work anymore. Oh, bummer. Yeah. Oh, that makes me hungry. It looks so yummy. Look, there's the raspberries and the pears. Oh, they make me hungry. They're so yummy. Yummy to eat. Uh-oh, that's scary. There's a fire. Yeah, we don't touch those. That looks ouchy. Ooh, scary. Hurry, man, get out of the house. Oh, I love bubbles. Oh, they're so peaceful and floating around. Oh, I love bubbles. Yeah. You love bubbles too. Ew. That's disgusting. Ew, ew, ew. Yucca. I do not want to eat those. Yucca, yucca. Those need to go in the garbage.
Okay. Okay, so as our first step, we had 2 coders coded the valence of parents' emotional expression. These were coded on the valence scale from -5 to 5. And they coded every half second during the time participants shared their feelings. Another thing is that they were blind to both the pictures presented and also the participants' verbal responses because we wanted to prevent these cues to bias or interfere with the facial coding. Okay, and here's what we found. In the adult-directed condition, we found that participants maintained a mildly positive expression throughout, even no matter whether they were talking about positive or negative picture. So, like for example, when they talk about negative picture, they would put a mild smiley face and say, "I feel scared." So this suggests that in the adult-direct condition, at least here, they are mainly using the emotional expressions for social purposes, such as to appear polite and also friendly in front of other people. And in the infant-direct condition, we found a difference between the positive picture and negative picture conditions. So when they are talking about positive pictures, their faces are positive. And when they are talking about negative pictures, although it's not super negative, but it's less positive compared to the positive condition. So this suggests that parents' emotional expressions are more differentiated when they are talking with preverbal infants compared to when they were talking with other adults. Okay, but you might wonder, here there might be a confounding variable here. In the adult direct condition, the participant was talking with a stranger. The experimenter was a stranger to them. But in the infant direct condition, they were talking to a close family member. And to address this potential confounding variable, we did a follow-up experiment. So here we tested another group of parents, and in the main change is that in the adult direct condition, we asked them to talk to their close family member. This person is usually their spouse. And in the infant direct condition, they talk to their babies. So here we controlled the closeness between the two conversational partners between conditions. And here we found that in the adult direct condition, we did find that their emotional expressions became more differentiated when talking to a close family member compared to a stranger. But more importantly, in the infant direct condition, this difference was even stronger in that condition. So this suggests even when controlling when we control the closeness between the two conversational partners, parents or adults' emotional expressions are more differentiated when they are talking to infants compared to adults. So this taken together, these two experiments suggest that adults' facial expressions provide a richer source of information when talking to preverbal infants compared to adults. And as said, these are preliminary findings. There are still a lot of open questions. For example, here we only coded the valence of parents' facial expression. There's a lot of information to code actually, but now we have only coded the valence of the facial expression. And one of the immediate next steps would be to code the emotion categories of those expressions to see whether parents show more prototypical expressions of emotion when talking to babies compared to adults. And we also don't know whether there are any cross-cultural differences. So what has been found in the literature is that when adults are talking to another adult, there are a lot of cross-cultural differences. There's a lot of social display rules, but we don't know whether this kind of infant-directed emotional expressions is relatively universal across cultures. We don't know yet. And we also don't know whether the expressiveness of a parent actually facilitates infants' learning, which is the findings we talked about in the first part of my talk. We don't know, we don't have evidence for the causal connection between the two yet. Okay. So these remain important questions for future research. So to end my talk, I'd like to go back to the picture I showed you at the beginning of my talk. So although emotional expressions have been commonly studied as indicators of feelings, here I hope I've shown you a little bit that they are also a rich source of information that even young children can use for learning and reasoning. And this powerful ability is likely supported by some of the fundamental ability to do cognitive appraisals and may also be facilitated by adults who naturally express their emotional expressions in front of babies for pedagogical purposes. And taken together, I hope this research advances our understanding of how humans think and learn by using emotion as information. Thank you. And this is my lab, and I'm also happy to take some questions. Do we do questions? Okay.
Okay, questions? Whoever you could just speak. I don't think you
You?
This is super interesting, and you actually addressed a few of my questions at the end, because I was also thinking cross-culturally. But I was curious, in your adult-directed, infant-directed comparison, did you always use the mothers in that case?
So when we collected data, we were actually very ambiguous. We just asked the participant to whoever is with the baby. But naturally, most of the participants were mothers. We got a few fathers, but most of the main participants were mothers. Yeah,
So
we
you don't
didn't.
have enough to compare.
We don't have enough data to compare. Yeah. But it would be interesting to look at whether mothers and fathers are different. Yeah.
Thank you for an interesting talk. It makes me rethink the importance of emotion. So I have two questions. One is, so it sounds like emotion is one of the unique sources of information where we not only understand how a person's feeling in the moment, but something about their prior expectation, like something about that person's background, right? So do you think it is unique in that way, or am I just not thinking about other sources of information in the same? Like, almost everything else as stimuli only gives you information about the current state, not about past experiences.
Yeah, there has been. So I think my understanding of emotional expression is that it can be a bit more informative, like if your emotional expression is due to your past experience or some of your beliefs and desires in the past, then at the current moment, it would elicit your emotion, although the emotion itself might be current, but some of the other things it's your history, and that will reflect how you would feel and also express on the face. So given that, it can, because there's the causal link, right? It's not just the underlying emotion, but this all the past history. It can be informative, depending on the context. It can be informative about the past as well, and other things like history, and also even things like personality or other things.
Yeah. And then my second question is, so I think like there is, it's intuitive that we probably engage in emotion needs.
Mm-hmm.
And on the one hand, I feel like it's just a way to try to grab the infant's attention, but I wonder to what extent we also intuitively are trying to teach babies and children the proper like social context, right? This is a funny thing, this is a sad thing. So do you have any sense of which came first? Or?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, and I think not just for emotion needs, but there's a lot of work looking at infant-directed speech. One of the things they look at is whether infant-direct speech is more attention-grabbing. Like they showed infants infant-direct speech versus adult-direct speech, and see whether babies prefer and look longer at infant-direct speech. So the attention thing is definitely one thing. And in terms of the content, because people's emotional expressions vary, I think it does. My guess is that it provides some additional information. Like I have a toddler who wants to do all kinds of things, and I have to, sometimes if I just say it, it does not work. I have to be very serious and say, no, don't touch that. I have to put my face and also my vocal expression consistent with the thing I'm trying to teach him. And that usually works better.
Thank you for an interesting talk. The experiment you did with the children who were looking at teachers' expressions of surprise, or you seem to have this really big developmental shift at about 6 years old, where 6 and above could do it really well, and before that it was sort of chance, or
Yeah.
didn't seem to be able to get it at all.
Yep.
And I guess that surprised me a bit, because I don't understand why it would be 6, except that kids go to school at 6 in our culture.
Yes.
Although there are places where they go earlier or later. So I wondered, if paying attention to teachers, and indeed just even judging competence comes as you reach school age, and
Yep.
whether that shifts culturally. Do you know anything? Can you talk about that? Do you know anything about your participants' background?
Yeah, that's a very, very great point. So in the literature, children start to use surprise to draw inferences about false belief at around like 5. It's earlier than this, but we found this happen around 6. And first, the participants are from the States. So it's around the same time, 6-year-old, they started schooling. And that is exactly one of our hypotheses. So there are several hypotheses. One is that maybe because the inference here is about competence, which is a relatively abstract quality, so that compared to other things like in the infant sample, what we have is just how a toy works, what color is the ball. This kind of relatively obvious and simple thing they can directly see, but competence is something relatively abstract. So this is one explanation that why this ability develops so late. And another possibility is exactly what you mentioned. It may be possible that once a child starts school, when you put a group of kids in an environment and there is an authority figure, which is a teacher, they start to pick up on this kind of subtle cues about whether they are good, whether other kids are good, and they started to learn this kind of social cues and use that to draw rich inferences, which I think is super interesting. And it would be interesting to look at other cultures where school starts earlier or later to see whether this also differs, depending on that schooling experience. Yeah, but it's a great point.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering if you think that the emotions that you're talking about at the end could serve an additional purpose as to kind of, we mentioned attention grabbing and also maybe the condition or teaching the child as to what the appropriate emotional response might be in the situation. But it seems that even with the partner, there's this underlying positive valence with all of this. There's kind of like a theatrical aspect to it, especially with the mother in the example that you had given. There's a negative look on her face, but the whole interaction is kind of in this positive realm. So I guess my question is, do you think that additionally emotions can also signal to the child that I am devoting these resources to you, or that there's kind of like a positive underlying aspect to this relationship as contrary to somebody who maybe doesn't have as much emotional expression?
Yeah. That's a great question. So I think there's, in terms of parent and child interaction, there's actually a lot of components going on. First, the parent might have the pedagogical intention that they want to teach the kid something about what they are talking about, what they are communicating, especially when the kid is nonverbal. When they have not learned a language, they use a lot of the emotional expression to communicate. This is negative, this is scary, this is disgusting, this kind of communication. But at the same time, I feel like parents are also trying to not upset their baby. They won't just show a super negative expression. It's kind of, they're trying to strike a balance between that. So that, I think that's also probably explains why in the negative picture condition, their facial expression is not super negative. It's kind of like when we average across time, it's in experiment 1, it's like slightly above chance, and in experiment 2 is at chance. It's not at chance, zero, which is neutral. It's possible that parents are trying to do all kinds of things, and yours might be a mix of negative and positive emotional expressions, explaining what's happening in that condition.
There's a whole other aspect of emotional communication, which is communication to the infant about himself, right? So not about the world, but for instance, states, the beliefs of the parent about them, what they about. Have you done any work on that as well?
About the
Approval, disapproval of the job.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. There's some old work about infant-directed speech that babies can tell, like approval versus disapproval from the vocal expression. Here in my data, I haven't looked at that, but it might be in a little bit of the negative picture describing conditions, like when there's fire, many parents, they try to tell them that, no, we need to stay away. It's kind of both communicating what's happening in the environment and also teach them some of the behavioral responses. It might be combined in those conditions, but we haven't looked at that separately. That's a very interesting future direction. Any other questions?
It's very interesting. interesting to see, well, in a lot of the study presented that most of the emotions were expressed towards the participant, like babies or kids. On the other side, think about it, in reality, the emotional information is not always direct to the younger ones, but also it's communicative. There are emotional communication among adults. Like in a typical family environment, two caregivers are going to argue all the time, and baby is going to watch.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started, thinking about this. Wow, yes, infants definitely are very, very keen to utilize emotional information and to make inference about the world, inference about personality. But what about the information is not directly
Mm-hmm.
to them? What about the information? The emotional information exists and it's kind of in the irrelevant manner,
Mm-hmm.
like in the context.
Yeah.
How good are they to utilize those? Would they ignore this, or actually they will actually use this to make further inferences?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I have any data, but just can.
Yeah, I don't have data either. It's just an open question now. So two things I wanted to say. First is that I think we haven't looked at this in the emotion domain, but for the speech domain, people have they have been looking at this for a while, like infant direct speech versus overheard speech. And there's a lot of work looking at that. I think there might be some evidence in that domain. And second, there's some studies looking at the generalization, whether children would generalize the information conveyed by emotional expression. I think there's one study looking at the emotional expression is the same, but it differs between conditions whether the expression is infant-directed. If infants get the cue like, hi baby, this kind of infant, they know that, the adult is communicating to them. Then they take that as pedagogical cues, and they think that that's about something about the object, and they also generalize this to other objects in their environment. They take that as a pedagogical cue. It's about object. Versus when it's overheard, there's no infant-directed cues. They just see another person. That person didn't look at the baby, but the baby look at them, and that person showed an emotional expression. They think that's more about that person. Maybe that person has a preference. They won't necessarily generalize it to other objects. So they do take this kind of infant-directed as a cue to think that, okay, this is the learning mode. I'm learning about the world, and then they think, oh, it's not just the object, but also the category. There's a little bit of evidence there, but overall there is little evidence. We don't know how the strength of the inference and also to what extent babies would generalize in novel situations.
I have a follow-up to that.
Mm-hmm.
What if the overheard speech is child-directed or like pet-directed, or maybe even directed, but it's not directed to them? Do you know if anyone's looked at that? Because we know that people talk to dogs like they talk to babies. So do babies get confused by that? Like, are they sensitive to that?
They get jealous, right?
Or they get jealous?
Jealous, yeah, probably. I don't know. Probably there are people looking at it. Oh,
I
right.
just thought of that.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I don't know if anyone's looked at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that kids find other kids more stimulating. So my guess is that they pay a lot of attention to information that's given by other things like them.
So how much of it, I'm a father of young children, and I find myself trying to put labels to my kids' emotions, trying to help them understand what they're doing. So how much of this emotional learning is going to inform how much they use their own emotions as information? Because ultimately, as they grow up, that's going to be the primary big source of information. Right? So how much, is there a big role there, or do we just learn how to use their emotions in the absence of the social learning? Do you know how much?
Yeah, it's a important future direction. So I'm only aware of a lot of the clinical work when you really teach someone to learn to identify their emotional expression and also reason about it. It helps their their regulating of their emotion. But most of that stuff, I think it's on youth or adolescents, and they do find the connection between how fine-grained you can identify your own emotion. That connects to their mental health, a lot of that part of things. There hasn't, to my knowledge, there hasn't been work looking at the younger kids, but there has been some work there that thing plays a very important role in terms of mental health and subjective well-being.
When do we stop using like emotion rules or any of these others? How old are the kids when we stop? And is it like steep or is it very gradual?
That's a great question. We have some longitudinal data. We looked at, so there are data looking, they put a head cam on a baby, and then when baby looks around, they can record the environment. And there is longitudinal data on that. We analyzed that. And we found that, so first we primarily found positive expressions, and second, the positive expression drop during the second year of life. That's also the time the babies learn to speak. They started to learn, at least understand a lot of language. So it's my guess, probably, I don't have a lot of data, but probably it does disappear at some age, and it's probably around when they acquire language. But initially, probably all this kind of like infant direct speech, infant directed emotional expression help them to learn language. And after that, there are other ways to communicate, like just directly using language to say, I'm happy, I'm sad, this kind of communication.
Any sex differences?
Good question. I think I explored some of the data set. I can't remember in detail, but for the PNS paper, the first study, girls are a little bit better than boys, but overall, yeah, I don't remember too clearly about the sex difference. There might be a slight difference between boys and girls.
Yeah, I was thinking about the study was started at 12 months of age. That if hypothetically, if you go younger and more likely to show girls and maybe show this capacity by utilizing emotions to navigate the individual world much earlier compared to boys. So that
And there might also be cross-cultural differences depending on whether they treat gender as a important thing. Some culture, they might not try to prevent that from happening, but other cultures, they might still have some stereotypes, like girls should be like this, boys need to look at that. There's also a lot of the stereotype thing about emotion and gender, which is not covered here, but there's a lot of literature looking at like adults. Like they usually, in old days, people associate female with things like sadness and fear, and males with anger. And when people violate that, they do think that it's that it decreases their social preference, things like that. There's a lot of work about that too in adults, in adult literature. Oh, mm-hmm.
Did the intensity of the emotionese vary the results of looking time and things like that in the infants? Did you see any trends of more emotionese causes higher looking time or more exacerbated results?
We haven't looked at that. So currently, I'm only looking at the children and adults separately, and I haven't connected these two together. And whether there's a causal relationship, my hypothesis is that there might be, like when a parent is more expressive, it's better for the kids to learn about emotional expressions and also use that as information for learning, but I don't have evidence yet.
Okay. All right. So, well, please join me. Thank you again for the
Okay, thank you.